But today we just want to take a look as well and see what the effects are on our resource mobilization as NGOs. What does all this mean? With this increased need, are we seeing increased funding for organizations to intervene, or are funds being diverted for other purposes, and we're seeing people struggling to get money? So we're going to find out today, and we have a really amazing panel that's going to help us take a look at this. And we're hoping that you can also share and ask questions and participate as much as possible. We're going to start to hear from Rumbi Funzawabaya. So she runs an organization in the UK. Let me go one back here. She runs an organization in the UK, Migrant Family Support. So we want to hear from her. It's a fairly new NGO, so really keen to know, as a starter NGO, how has the experience been for her around resource mobilization? We're going to hear from Blessing. Blessing is with UNFPA at the moment, but we know he's also had various roles as a program manager, as a grant manager as well previously, so his experience is invaluable as well. And he'll be taking us through maybe looking at the impact, excuse me, of COVID-19 on resource mobilization. So what's the impact? What has happened with our funders and our implementing organizations? And then also just helping us understand, so is there a new normal that we're talking about, or are things just the same as they were before? We're also then going to hear from Tuonge. Tuonge is head of business development, grants management and communications. She's in Malawi with Action Aid Malawi. So we'll get her perspective on just the opportunities that are there around resource mobilization at the moment, and also how we should be responding as organizations. What's the required response in this environment? And then we'll round off with Tariro Tandi. She's in Nairobi, and she's the head of partnership and development at UFA. And then she'll just give us tips and hints on how we can have successful resource mobilization at this time. So it's a packed program. We've got 2 hours to cover all this. So I'm hoping Ruby is already in the room. I know it's pretty early in the UK, but I hope she managed to wake up. Michelle, have you seen her?
Ruby here? I'm here. Yes, she's around. Good, I am. Thank you very much, Kudzai.
Fantastic. All right. All right, I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Kudzai. I'm just wanting to share my screen. Yep. Right. So my name is Rumbi. Sorry, I don't have my camera on. It's very early, and I've just come off another Zoom. So I've already been on Zoom this morning since 6 o'clock. Yes, my name is Rumbi Funzawabaya. I'm Kudzai's sister, and I run a non-profit called Migrant Family Support. My background, perhaps, is just to give some context, is in law. I'm a solicitor, and I've been running I ran a private legal firm for 10 years before I moved into the non-profit sector. I run a community interest company, which is only about 3 years old. And we have a profit side and a non-profit side. But for the last 3 years, we've really struggled in getting grants. But when COVID hit in the UK, it hit so hard. And we had to change the way that we operated. And COVID has been it's been a curse and a blessing. For us as a starter NGO or starter community interest company, it's been a blessing in the sense that it's enabled us perhaps to change the way that we operate and to be able to get a leg into funding circles and into organizations that give us grants, because there were a lot of emergency funds that were released in the UK, which then enabled us to be able to also get part of the pot. Because traditionally what had been happening is you have the big organizations who would get most of the funding for projects that they're running, and which are sustainable, which they've been doing for a long time. But startups were finding it really difficult to get their foot in the door. And so for us, that was an opportunity for us to get our foot in the door and to be able to start to build relationships with funders, for them to see the work that we deliver. We've been working self-funding and just delivering our projects, just doing what we need to do. And I think for me, coming from a profit sector, I knew that there was something that I needed to do, and I would create my own income to be able to do it. So a lot of my money that I earned, I would pour it in, and other business that what we have, we would pour it into our nonprofit initially, and self-fund, and try and generate income from books, from other services that we did. But it wasn't enough for us to really make a great impact. But what has happened with COVID-19 and also with Black Lives Matters, so for us, there's been three things in 2020 which changed the playing field for us. One was COVID-19. Two was the impact that it had on BME groups in the UK. So for Black and other ethnic minority groups, we were hit hard by the pandemic, lost a lot of people, and continue being hit hard. And this highlighted the inequalities that are here. It highlighted even inequalities in healthcare, and it showed deprivation in our communities. It showed the great need for work to be done in our communities. And then the third thing was Black Lives Matters, because Black Lives Matters highlighted the inequalities in the voluntary sector, in the sense that Black-led organizations were not being given a chance. Black-led organizations were not being given much funding. Black-led organizations we were just being discriminated against in every sector. And so it brought things to the front. And now we're standing a better chance. There's more funding that's made particularly for our type of organizations. We are small, but we're grassroots. We deal with the issues. We do research to find out issues, but we have a clear understanding of the issues that affect the communities that we serve. So we've seen what has happened in the UK in the last year, which has helped us as a new organization to be able to get our foot in the door. I had prepared this slide, which just talks about some of the things that I've had to learn, some of the things that I've had to do, some of the mistakes that I've made. But I've just seen the panel and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these are people who are so experienced in grant making that some of the things I'm going to say might seem to be quite basic, but I will still share, because for me, it's been that learning curve of I've had to learn. I'm the one who writes the bids. I'm the one who delivers most of the projects, because we are small. We don't have a lot of resources in terms of human resource, in terms of volunteers, in terms of specialist experts who can help us with the grant making, with the writing our bids. So I've had to learn how to do that. I've had to learn to do that while I'm juggling delivering and dealing with some of the frontline issues. And so it's been very challenging on that front, because everything has been happening so fast over the last 24 months. But I remember getting my first grant and telling Kudzai, oh, I've got my first grant, and I was so excited. And then after that, I told him the second one, and then I think I stopped, because my children were saying, Mom, you used to get so excited, but now it seems that you're always getting granted. And I think the reason is because maybe I now have learned how to do it, but also we're building a track record and we're building a relationship with the funders. And so, these are simple, basic things that I had to get in place. And maybe these are some of the areas where some of the smaller organizations, which are just have a small leadership team, can struggle on. Just basic things like, even when you're applying for funding, bank accounts, constitutions, annual accounts, clear track record, policies and procedures. It's so hot on protecting vulnerable people, vulnerable adults. We work with women, we work with victims of domestic violence. So we have to show that we have all our policies and procedures in place, that our staff and our volunteers are all checked for police clearances and things like that. So having all the paperwork, they might seem like really basic things, but for a small organization, it takes so much of your human resource to do this. I think for me, when you have a passion and you feel you love something or you're called to do it, you just do it. And Kudzai, when he came to the UK, he's the one who said to me, I didn't even have a bank account. I was just doing the work and not even properly set up and organized. And I remember the accountant in him and KFM getting things into place and getting structures in place, which has really helped now when we have to be running full steam ahead to deal with the issues. And clarity in our project briefs. I used to get confused in terms of my project briefs of who, what, where, how, and when. It's simple things like that. So during COVID-19, because the issues have been so clear for everyone to see, we had to do projects that were simplistic in terms of my projects that I had in my mind were really complex projects, I think because of my legal background. But during COVID-19, we realized that people don't have food, people don't have anywhere to live, people's relationships are breaking down. So we had to deal with the issues as they were. And that clarity of what the issues were helped us to write project briefs that were sellable to our funders, that perhaps that related to their issues, and it was quite clear how we were going to deliver because it was quite simple. And that's something that I've learned during this time, is to break things down. Even if you're providing hot meals, which is the first project that we did, we realized that people did not have access to their usual places where they could get food, like food banks. And so we provided African inspired meals where we cooked sadza and meat and vegetables and delivered it to people who were self-isolating or people who couldn't get to food, who couldn't get food. That was something very simple. But what that food delivery project did is it then opened up other opportunities because we realized other needs amongst the same group of people. And then it just transitioned into bigger projects. And I arrived at the place that I wanted to be at, but in a different way. So it was providing the basic things, the aims and the objectives, the target audience, the duration. That's one of the things now. Our projects were fixed on emergency COVID relief. So it was quick for us as a new organization to be able to give and to deliver what's needed there. We were able to reinvent ourselves, go digital, change everything about how we delivered. Perhaps because we are quite small, we were able to reinvent ourselves fast, we were able to be innovative, and we were able to meet the needs right there and then. So that was something that was perhaps an advantage for us, which helped us during this time. And so some of these other issues are so clear in terms of when your project, what need it addresses and the difference it will make, having the clear outcomes and showing what it will achieve and what difference it will make in the people's lives. I learned a lot about budgeting, things that I didn't know I had to learn. And now that having done other projects, I can see where I've sold myself short, where I haven't done it well. So it's something that we've been learning about clarity and sustainability as well. And so that's been really, really useful in clarity. And first of all, it was just preparation, clarity. And this time in COVID, we haven't had to do a lot of consultation reports ourselves because there've been so many reports that have been released, so many it's there, it's clear as day what the issues are. And one of the things that I've learned now is learning how to know the funders and find out who are the funders who are sympathetic to our causes, who is sympathetic to Black funders, who's sympathetic to the issues that affect ethnic minorities, who's sympathetic to migrants and refugees, and know which funders to approach, which funders, and to talk to them. I think that's something that I've built confidence to do, is to talk to them and find out if our project fits their criteria, I've been able to now have meetings with them. And another thing that I've done as well as a new organization as well is to find out who they funded before, what projects they funded. I've spent so many hours reading other projects, learning what other people are doing, how they're doing it, and learning about the people that they funded because they showcase them. It's all there. But once I've been able to see, then I've been able to tailor my work to meet the specifics of the grants, but also to see what type of people they usually work with, and then to go and study those organizations and to see how they do things, see their structures, see their successes, read some of their stories, and I've learned through that. So when I now write my bids, I've been able to incorporate some of the things that I've learned, and also just reading, what is the eligible expenditure, what things can be funded and what can't be funded, and talking to them as well, attending their webinars. They're so good at giving information, and so that's really helpful. I think some of the grant funders, I've realized, assume that you don't know, and so they are very, very helpful in teaching and in giving information and helping you and even checking your project before you submit it. So that's one of the things. As a new organization, it's good to ask questions. There have been so many opportunities, and that's something that we have consistently done. And yeah, I think this is something that, again, we've had to leave enough time for our applications and the application processes. When you don't have a team that works on grants and on bid writing, it's very difficult. This leaving enough time is just crazy because the deadlines are so close together, and you feel like you're always writing bids, doing evaluation, monitoring, and not being able to deliver. If you're a person like me who's so passionate about the cause and who wants to just deliver, it's very difficult balancing that time. And when you're a small startup, you don't have the human resources to be doing all these things. The time you take to, even in this time, we've had volunteer fatigue, we've had volunteers dropping out, we've had volunteers being sick, we've had volunteers dealing with their own grief and bereavement. And so we're short on human resource, and then the bids keep, the funding keeps coming out, and you've got to meet the deadlines, you've got to plan for 2021 and recovery and beyond. And so it's time is such a valuable resource. So it might seem like something small to say reviewing the application form, assessing what other information you need, checking, proofreading, editing, double checking your budgets, and doing all these things to check, because if your forms are not clear, it might seem like a small thing, but it will be just rejected right at the beginning. So that's something that is important in terms of small organizations like ours, is having enough time to do some of these things. And we've fed this back to the funders, who have then simplified their application procedures. They've been able to make them more friendly, and they even have recruited people in their organizations who help people, especially from organizations such as ours, which are Black-led, small, and which cater to the needs of ethnic minorities, to help us in those processes. So knowing your funder helps, because you know what help is available, they can go through it with you and they can assist you. So that's been really, really helpful. Right, I think I've just got 2 minutes, I think. So yeah, so some of the things that we've had to learn, I've had to learn not to use legalese, because I come from a legal background. I was using the wrong language. I was using law language in my proposals. I think that's why they were rejected. So I've had to really simplify, using plain language, some things that are so simple, and even using positive statements like "we will," and making it easier for the funder to read. So that's been really useful. And yeah, so just, this is just something very simple. I'm not going to go through it, but the top tips that I've learned is the clarity, simplicity, sticking to the brief, not waffling, and having detailed budgets on real figures, not just knowing that, okay, I can get 10,000 and just putting 10,000, not, not saying, okay, the maximum is 30, so let me make up things to make it 30, but putting the real figures of what you're going to do. Yeah, and just reading it aloud as well to make sure that it does make sense. Those are some of the things that we've had to do. And so some of the 10 common reasons why applications fail, especially for small organizations, it's because of the legal form, lack of the charity status, or they're not registered, or they don't have a constitution, or they don't have a bank account, poor planning of projects, definitely, and not having a lot of foresight and thought into in the projects, budgets which are just too exaggerated, or most of the money is going to you as the CEO and is paying salaries, and sometimes when your budgets are it can be inflated in terms of how much you get. Missing deadlines is very common, and incomplete forms, supporting documents incomplete, or asking for too much as well, or over delivering and over promising, and then under delivering as well. So those are some of the things that we have learned. We've had a lot of success. If I can give context, my budget for my last year was only very small, less than 10,000. But this year, our budget has moved. We've been able to be awarded grants that has really impacted our budget. Has enabled us to recruit staff, has been able us to deliver on a larger scale, and it's really helped us as a small organizations to just get our foot through the door and to be able to plan bigger projects as well. So yeah, so we've had quite a bit of success in the last year, and I think finally, the concept that I had is taking it's actually taking shape, and it's taking a good form. So yeah, so I hope that's been helpful. I've just ran through it. I know that my time is up, and if there's anyone who's got any questions, I think I've got 5 minutes for questions, or maybe 2, I'm not sure, to Michelle and Kudzai. But yeah, that's it from me.
Right, thanks, Rumbi. We had wanted to include your question time in this 20 minutes, but we can just take questions if anyone has questions for Rumbi, the next 2-3 minutes. It's been great watching her organization grow. I think Migrant Family Support, I've been watching their growth and working with them a bit as well. But for me, it's just sometimes you need to know it takes time before you get to where you want. So I think I worked with Rumbi and her group in 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
And it's only now that we're really starting to see the growth. So that investment in your time, in your own resources for those starter NGOs that are out there, it's important, but you get to see the rewards. And I thought that's why it'd be really good to have Rumbi share her story. But if there are no questions, Rumbi, I know, yes, we've heard your story, but we've got lots of Zimbabwean NGOs that are here. And I know you've spoken about, well, from what I'm seeing, there seems to be so much funding available in the UK. How do we access it? Is there any way that we as Zimbabwean NGOs can tap into all this money that you've been talking about?
So most of the funding that we apply for is for people who are here for delivering projects in the UK. And one of the things I've seen is that they've cut some of the funding for other, I think it was an issue that was debated in Parliament, and they've cut some of the funding for other countries because there's such a great need here. And I think that's one of the difficulties, perhaps the challenges that's going to affect Zimbabwe. But there's also been a lot that has been poured in, and it's from organizations which traditionally support. But I think the problem that that will always be there is you've got the bigger organizations, isn't it? You've got that get most of the funding, which is what is the problem here, that the smaller organizations may not get a part of it. But it's important perhaps to search for even searching here for grants and organizations which are charities, which are registered in the UK, which run projects. So for example, if you run projects here and in Zimbabwe as well, you are then able to access, when you're registered in the UK as a charity, you're then able to access the grant funding here, which is international. So that's a good thing for the smaller organizations to have dual registration and to register as charities even here as well, because then that gives you access to the pot, a wider pot as well.
Yeah, thank you. And Ruby can help you if you want to register. She's helped us register our own trust in the UK. And hopefully we'll also have success stories to be telling. Just one last question here, Rumbi, before you go, from Tariro. You spoke of adapting and reinventing yourself in emergency situations and context. How can one do this without losing their identity and constantly going with the wind, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think that's a very difficult thing, because for me, I struggled with that because I had a vision and I knew, how I wanted to fulfill that vision. But when emergency hit, I was forced to adapt. I mean, I never thought I'd be cooking salsa, because I thought that was never part of the vision that I had for the organization. But I was still able to deliver my core values and the issues that I am passionate about, even through dealing with an emergency. And I think in emergencies, it's not a situation of constantly adapting yourself, but COVID-19 is such a unique situation, a pandemic that we've had. And every organization should seek to see how can we give COVID response. So, and what you might see as holding on to your identity and what you want to do and going with the wind, in an emergency, I think that doesn't really apply, because in an emergency, there is a need for a response. And what we've seen here is some organizations just closed down because they couldn't adapt to what is going on. They couldn't readapt to the fact that we can't meet face to face, that we can't deliver as we had to deliver. So there was a need to reinvent yourself in this situation. So it's sticking to your values, but seeing what is the situation that we're facing and what do the funders want at this time, and then trying to reinvent yourself within the context of your identity and your core values and what you want to do. So I'll take Tugwi Trust, for example. Sorry, Kudzai. Tugwi Trust provides school fees for children. So during COVID, children are not able to go to school. So reinventing how could Tugwi respond to the situation is perhaps getting smartphones for the children, getting laptops for the children, doing supplementary education and being able to deliver school for them where they are, buying them data because they don't have data, they're in the rural areas, or getting books that have got the syllabus and the curriculum so they can do it at home and distributing those books, or knowing that some children were fed at school. Here, children got school meals. They can't go to school, but there's poverty at home, they can't eat. So Tugwi Trust could then say, right, we're going to deliver food to our children at home and we're going to look after them. So that's the type of adapting. It's still within what you are trying to achieve as an organization into your core group, but it's thinking, how can we deliver in this situation? What's the greatest need to the same group of people and in line with what our organization still does?
All right. Thanks, Rumbi. I know you have another meeting you're rushing for, but maybe you can join us a bit later on, because there's some questions that we'll need you to respond to. But
okay,
we want to get on to Blessing's presentation.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm here until 8, and then I can respond in the chat.
All right. So you can maybe even, if you can look through the chat box and maybe answer some of those questions in there, that'll be great. So that we also then move on to Blessing. I know he's also got a meeting straight after his presentation.
Thank you.
Right, so thank you, Rumbi. And then Blessing, we're just going to go straight into you. We've cut into your time, I know. So if you can please just go ahead and start your presentation when you're ready. Thank you. And as Blessing prepares his presentations, it's amazing, I think, the diverse number of people that we have from different organizations, NGOs, we've got, I think, consultants and service providers. So just take your time to also go through the chat box and see who's here, and also an opportunity, I think, for all of us to network as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Midzi, for this opportunity. I'm briefly putting on my camera so that maybe colleagues, they get to associate with the face that is behind the machine right now. So my name is Blessing Yabumbo, as you have heard from Mr. Midzi. As a way of a brief introduction, I'm currently in the UN system as a program specialist with UNFPA. Part of my responsibilities around resource mobilization, fundraising as others who may want to call it, but previously I've worked with a number of international and local NGOs in the fields of program management, resource mobilization, donor engagement, being part of resource mobilization, etc. So I hope everyone is hearing me loud and clear at this stage, because I'm about to turn off my camera because, you know, net connectivity can be a bit of a challenge if I continue with my camera on.
We can hear you fine, Blessing. Yes, go ahead.
Great. And the presentation, confirm, Mr. Midzi, that you are seeing the presentation?
Yes, we're seeing it. You might want to do a slideshow, though.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
It's now on slideshow. So as you could see from the program, maybe before I start, also want to acknowledge on the list of participants there, locally, and some they've got international experience. I would also ask them to say that some of the presenters that will be coming after me, I also associate with them in some way. My sister from Malawi, they will be coming after me, who is at ActionAid. ActionAid is my previous employer. I was a program manager for them. Then I also see that there is my learned sister there, Tariro. Tariro, once worked together whilst she was still here in Zimbabwe on some certain consortium, and of course before she moved on to Nairobi. So I'm associated with some of the presenters who are part of this, and I'm glad to be part of this panel. So I will delve straight into what I'm expected to present today, being impact of COVID-19 on resource mobilization, and also briefly touch on the new normal. Then as a way of introduction, I only have 2 slides that I want to present that will take us maybe for the next 15 or so minutes. Then we also leave a bit of a time so that we can reflect. Remember, I'm not a perfectionist in this area. I'm not yet a guru in this field, and I also want to learn from others in as much as I'll be sharing a little bit of the experience that I've gained over the past 8 or so years in the resource mobilization field. So you find that when we talk of COVID-19, it has had a number of adverse effects. There are a lot of uncertainties around COVID-19. It's been prolonged. You know, when it's almost a year now since COVID-19 hit a lot of countries. It started in Asia then of course it had to spread. And when we started lockdowns in Zimbabwe, I think we started our lockdowns around March last year. So we're almost getting 2 or 12 months of COVID-19. So it has had a number of effects, not only in resource mobilization generally to start with. It has affected a number of sectors. It has affected a number of programming within the NGO sector itself. So we find that the COVID-19 situation is presenting a myriad of challenges to traditional resource mobilization strategies now when you come back home. A lot of development gains, investments over the past years, they face a risk of being backtracked if we are not agile in terms of more resource mobilization. Then ultimately the effect now will be felt. Of course, yes, we are talking of the effects of COVID-19 on resource mobilization, but we find that the effects will ultimately be felt by the communities that we are trying to serve. because they are waiting for that every penny that you may want to receive, that we are waiting to receive from philanthropies, from individuals, from big donors, etc., foundations, etc. So I'll take you through the impacts there. I've tried to summarize them, but I'll be explaining as I go. So you find that the first impact that Urumbi also touched on, you find that there's the aspect of shrinking resources. So you find that this COVID-19 happening is not only happening in Africa, it's happening in America, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in Asia. So you find that some of these big donors within their home countries, they are also adversely affected. You know, when you talk of the states itself, it's leading in terms of the fatalities, in terms of infections around HIV, around a number of issues, COVID-19, etc. Sorry, I was mentioning about HIV to come later. So you find that the aspect of shrinking resources is quite a leading strain that or a leading impact that COVID-19 has had, because these donors now, they are having or they are channeling resources to deal with the effects of COVID-19 in their own backyards. So you find that some of these big countries, big donors, the traditional big donors, they're entering into recessions and they're entering into budget constraints that are definitely affecting what will now be available for support to other countries, the traditionally donor recipient countries, us being one of them. So you also find that besides the big donors, the big countries, they're also the individual givers, or they are equally affected. In some way, they are affected by COVID-19, or themselves they've been infected by COVID-19. And this also has an effect on what will be made available for support to other donor recipients, like in our case in Zimbabwe. Then the second impact there, you find that within the resource mobilization, some of the resource mobilization strategies and approaches themselves, they have been affected and they've been dealt with difficult by these circumstances of COVID-19. So you find that donor engagement efforts have been adversely affected. Rumbi was presenting about new organizations. So you find that if you're a new organization currently and you're trying to set up a new organization and COVID-19 came in before you were clearly set up or before you had started receiving significant or even the little resources or the little grants to kickstart your interventions, you find that as COVID-19 kicked in, it has affected some of the donor engagement strategies. You may talk of some of what we used to do before COVID-19. You know, you could set up appointments with philanthropies. You could set up physical appointments, not the online ones that we are now resorting to as the new normal that I'll touch on later. So you find that some of the relationships, what we used traditionally, the relationships would be built through that physical meeting. You start to know some of the donor contacts you get there. Maybe you get there, you realize that maybe it's your old college senior, or you have met in some meetings. You know, you could build relationships on a number of issues when you meet someone physically. So these are some of the physical meetings that have been definitely affected. And you know that when you are talking of resource mobilization, visiting donor offices, even locally, some organizations, they can even go to the extent of flying to Europe to meet some of the donors in Belgium, to meet some of the donors in London, to meet some of the donors in Zurich, Switzerland, and all those things, because they would want to build a stronger relationship from the start with those physical meetings. But this has been affected by COVID-19 because of the restrictions that are there, not only in Zimbabwe, but internationally in terms of movement, in terms of travel. So you find that even in some instances, you may want to build some relationships by inviting donors to events that you'll be hosting or to the field to showcase some of the good work that you are doing that may be aligned to some of the areas of interest of the donor. So these have definitely been affected by the COVID-19. So even that one of the other impacts, they're moving to the third point there, is the shift of focus towards COVID-19 response. So even that, you know, donors, when sort of HIV and AIDS kicked in, the focus moved to HIV and AIDS. When issues of maybe WASH, as an example, they kicked in, you know, when, so for instance, when cholera happens, there will be a focus in that area. When issues around another sector protection or human rights happens, there will be a focus around that area. So even that some donors with flexible funds, they are sort of availing them to support interventions that are related to COVID-19 response. So this has adversely now affected some of the organizations that do not have a focus that is on health. For instance, if some organization is basically focusing on WASH, if you do not align what your interventions to COVID-19, you're affected in terms of resources. If you're focusing maybe on governance issues, if you're focusing maybe on child protection issues, but you do not align yourself to the new realities, then you are definitely affected, because some funds, they have been shifted towards the current response to COVID-19. Then there's also another impact that COVID-19 has brought. There's a gloomy picture for additional resources beyond the current funding cycle. So even that maybe if you are receiving a funding for anything that is non-health related, maybe up to May, June this year, there's a gloomy picture in terms of availability of additional resources. I know locally here in Zimbabwe, I'm in some platforms where some organizations, they are already pulling off in their traditional areas of implementation that they've been for 10 years or so, because COVID-19 has dealt with them in a difficult way, and they do not have any other resources to extend their programming within those traditional geographical areas that they've been working in. In some of the adverse effects now, or the impact now of COVID-19, you find that the recipient organizations, in our case, it's a small organization or bigger organization, you will be affected in terms of delivering your mandate. Because to delivering a mandate or a mission, to deliver that development assistance, to deliver even that humanitarian assistance that you may want to extend to any community, you need resources. But if these resources are affected in a number of ways, like I've presented above, that will affect what you deliver on the ground. And related to that, there's the aspect of reversal of development gains, because some of these projects, they are being affected abruptly. In some instances, when the worst comes to reality, you find that with the pulling out of donors, some communities are not yet ready to be left. Of course, at some point, for sustainability sake, we have to leave the communities and they continue to themselves. But if there's that abrupt withdrawal from development investments or development interventions, communities that will be affected. And lastly, the point there that speaks to communities' need, they will continue to struggle with issues of food security and protection, among other development challenges. This is if COVID and
Can you hear me?
impacts continue for a longer period of time. We do not know.
Hi, Blessing.
All right, I'll continue. Yes. Continue.
We just lost your last statements. I think you were having a bit of a network problem. If you could just go back. Thank you.
Okay. So my last point was on communities in need to continue to struggle with food security and protection, among other development challenges. So I was saying that in some instances, this is related to the previous point. If there is withdrawal of development assistance or humanitarian assistance in some way, without communities themselves being ready, or without the organizations reaching the full cycle of their implementation, definitely this is going to affect the investments that have been made in terms of developing the communities that organizations have been working with in the past. Then there's also the aspect of communities. They will continue now to struggle with the issues that have been bedeviling them for a while. Issues of food insecurity, issues of protection, among other development challenges. So that's the point that I was making last, to say the impact of COVID-19, like I said when I was starting. Of course, yes, as organizations will say resources are not available, but you find that the impact will be felt mostly by these communities that have got a number of challenges that we are trying to intervene, work with them, and address together with them through that we'll be expecting from donors. But now all these have been impacted, or they've been adversely affected by the kicking in of COVID-19. So I'll move on to the slide on the new normal. Here I tried to formulate some issues based on my experiences, what I've been seeing happening as all organizations try to adjust to the new normal. And one thing that I also want to say is that the aspect of resource mobilization is not only affecting maybe emerging organizations or the local NGOs, international NGOs are equally affected. Multilateral institutions, they are also equally affected because, like of the point that I earlier on made, a number of the big donors, they are affected, they are impacted negatively by COVID-19, so they have to resort to addressing issues in their own backyard. So even that in the interim, it's not business as usual. In some instances, some organizations, of course, depending on your position, some they can say we have got maybe our 5-year, 10-year commitments to donors, and those donors, they'll stick on to those commitments. So for some, it can be business as usual, but generally, there is not business as usual. We need to align resource mobilization to the new normal there. So we find that every resource mobilization activity, every resource mobilization approach, most of these strategies and approaches, they now have to do a bit of alignment to resource mobilization. So you find that I earlier on mentioned about the effect of some of the approaches related to physical meetings with donors first to build these relationships for a start, or to continue nurturing existing relationships. So you now find that the new normal that is now associated with that is resorting to virtual engagement. So you find that you now have to set Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, Skype meetings with donors. But now the challenge that is there with this one is with new donors. So with new donors that we have never had a relationship with, I've got some nasty experience with some donors, I will not mention names. You try to forge a new relationship, you have never met them before. I've got some emails that haven't been responded to for a couple of months because, you know, donors, they build trust. They wouldn't want to maybe start some, as I've realized, they wouldn't want to start new relationships virtually. They start funding you before they have even visited and all those things. So you find that with some organizations as well, both donors and other international NGOs, right now they've even suspended meetings, physical meetings. So you find that you cannot override policies because of maybe resource mobilization for those organizations that are very strict to their policies. So you find that with visual engagement, though it's a new reality, but it also kicks in, it also comes in with a number of restrictions that are associated with it. Then the other new normal there that I'm presenting as the second is continue to position organizations for the few available resources. Like I said earlier on, there are some organizations, there are some donors, there are some big donors, there are some governments, there are some philanthropists who are still availing resources because their mandate maybe expects them to stick to child protection. So maybe when COVID-19 kicks in, they'll keep on supporting COVID-19, but with an element, or they'll keep on supporting child protection, but with an element of COVID-19 being integrated. So some of those donors, they still exist with those few resources still available. So you need to continue now positioning the organization. I think we know there are a number of strategies that we can use to continuously position your organization. This basically, in short or in layman's terms, we can basically talk of continue marketing the organization, continue sort of advertising the organization. This can be through representation, sharing your success stories with the donors, develop some articles, then you continue to publish them, be it on your website, social media platforms, sharing directly with the donors. So these are some of the strategies that can continue, or that we now have to strengthen as part of the new normal. Some organizations, they've always been doing this, but for some that have not been doing, they really need to adjust to this new normal so that donors will know that you exist. Though there's COVID-19, you need to continuously be in existence, at least on the donors' side. Then there's also the aspect of aligning organizational mandate to COVID-19, not necessarily saying that you have to move away from implementing your traditional lines of implementation. If you have been, the point that I'm making here is that at least for now, there is no organization that we can say we are continuing business as usual. But within your response strategy, within your development or humanitarian interventions, at least you have to bring in some components of COVID-19 response. In that way, you find that there are some resources that are still being availed if there is a lens of COVID-19 response attached to that. So there's this new reality that if as an organization, maybe if you stick to your traditional mandates, your traditional ways of implementing activities and resource mobilization, you will definitely be affected. But you now need to bring in this lens of COVID-19 in resource mobilization or implementation of that activity will also be a bit easier, because at least you can respond to those opportunities that are speaking to COVID-19 but aligned to your organizational mandate. Then there's also I'm receiving a notification that your internet connection is a bit bad. Confirm you are still hearing me, Mishi?
Hi, I think we just lost a word or two when you're mentioning the COVID lens, but yes, you can go ahead. We can now hear you.
Thanks, it's okay. I had received a notification that your internet connection is a bit bad. It's okay, I'll proceed. So I'll move on to targeting some individual philanthropies and private sector. So you find that as the new normal, there's also need for continuous donor profiling. I think when we had when I presented in the first session that we had around last year, that should be November, December, when we were talking about the issues around resource mobilization itself. We also mentioned that the issues of donor profiling, donor mapping, updating of our donor registers, etc. This is an ongoing activity. You do not do maybe say I've profiled my donors, I've done donor mapping, then maybe for the rest of the year or the rest of for the years doing anything. There's some individuals, there are some philanthropies, even some private sector that you've got a bit of some funding sources available. So as part of the new normal now, you have to keep on checking on who has got resources within that support your area of interventions or area of work. So this can be philanthropies, this can be the private sector, though no one is spared by COVID-19. But you may find that there's be a bit of pockets of philanthropies, of individuals, foundations, the private sector that have got a bit of resources. So you find there, I mentioned about CSR. So you find that maybe when there are crises like this, when there are pandemics like this, though the private sector is also equally affected, but for some private sector organizations, this can be an opportunity for them to extend the community social responsibility to say, we work with this community, we have been working in this economy, we have received support for the past years to do business in this community, but now because it's affected by COVID-19, we've got a bit of resources that we've set aside as CSR. So we need to now continue doing some mapping, continue updating our donor registers, continue doing assessing who has got a bit of resources, and then we tap into those, be it CSR, etc. So these are some of the things that we really need to move on to. So as part of the new norms, of the new reality, the new normal, we've been focusing maybe traditionally on the big donors or maybe on other philanthropies, but sort of not stepping into others. So we now need to diversify. We now need to look at our donor registers. We now need to look at our donor maps and see who we have been excluding, and if they have anything that can support our mandate. Then the other component that I mentioned there, I know some of the things that new normal that we now have to adjust to. Even that organizations, they are affected differently because due to resource mobilization. I'll give, for example, there are some organizations that may be based in the UK or based in the United States. They've got a bit of pool funding within the organizations themselves to say maybe if donors are to pull out today, they can still continue to run for the next 3, 4, 5 years because they have some reserves that can support their work. So you find that some organizations right now, of course, they are feeling the impact of COVID-19, but not to the extent of how others are feeling them. So there is also need for organizations to look, be it big organizations or small organizations or very big organizations. There is need now to tap into or consortia with organizations that still have a bit of resources. So you can come in as a sort of an implementing partner for a partnership or for a bigger INGO or for a bigger multilateral institution that still has resources, and those resources they can speak to your mandates and organization. So these are some of the areas that we really need to look into as part of the new normal. If you have not been into any consortia or partnerships, you really need to also invest beyond focusing on the DFIDs, on the USAIDs, on the embassies, or maybe on the UN agencies as well. You also need to look within, maybe if it's child protection, you really need to look if it's health, if it's gender-based violence, etc., food security. You have to look locally to say which are the organizations that are in this area locally, and are there opportunities to mobilize resources or to be part of those partnerships. Remember, if there are organizations that are very flexible in terms of taking on board new or emerging, organizing new or emerging NGOs or CBOs, whatever they can be, but there are also others that are strict, that may need those that have been tried and tested as implementing partners. So that also comes down to the issue of policies within these, especially the lead agencies for these partnerships or consortia. Then the last one that I mentioned there is speaks around about agitation more. We have to defend what we have in terms of resources, but we have to agitate for more with existing funders or donors, because you find that the relationship that you have already built, it's more of easier to manage rather than to establish a new relationship with a new donor because of the restrictions that I earlier on mentioned. So these are some of the critical issues that I just thought that we can discuss today, we can tabulate, and we can learn and share together. Otherwise, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. Amidzi, for any discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blessing. Very insightful presentation as well. Yeah, the new normal. For me, sustainability has been an issue for NGOs, but we've been worrying about it a little more now to wonder to what extent in our resource mobilization now should we be worried about the sustainability of our own organizations, and how can we factor this into our strategies and plans? Would you have any advice around that, Blessing?
Sorry, Mkomamidze, I missed the last part of your question.
Okay. I'm just wondering, as an organization, before we could fundraise for endowment funds, for capital projects as an organization, but we know that's becoming less and less available. So around sustainability of organizations themselves in the new norm, how can we incorporate that into our fundraising strategies? Would you have any ideas on that?
Okay. So you find that, some of the issues that we are seeing, like I said, some of the issues I was talking from experience, you find that in this new normal, there is some adjustment. They are calling it adjustment. Some they are calling it even narrowing down in terms of focus. It is. Are you still hearing me, Mkoma?
Yes. Please go ahead.
That notification. It's okay, great. So you find that the issues around sustainability in this COVID-19 era is indeed a challenge. So there's some adjustments that have to be made. Like I said, there's an example that I gave earlier on. I know of an organization that is pulling out in a certain district or certain districts that they've been operating in because of funding challenges. So even that some of the realities that are kicking in, some staff, they will have to lose their jobs in these trying times. But you find that when you now talk of sustainability, one of the issues that I can say, which is of course a bit difficult for most organizations, is to have a reserve. But you find that talking of a reserve, you cannot fundraise to a donor whilst you're talking of reserves. So there's need for most development organizations now to look into how they can build reserves. It could be from philanthropies, could be from individuals, but I know it's very a difficult situation to talk of reserves when you're bidding to funding to bigger donors. But we now have to find on the reserves. Why I'm saying reserves for sustainability, you find that when you have a sort of a reserve that can cushion you whilst going through this COVID-19 era, it can be one of the issues that can keep you going for some time. So that's one issue that I would like to table as part of the sustainability strategies for organizations. But I believe there are also colleagues who may be having other insights into this. We can learn from them as well. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Maxwell, as well, for sharing in the chat box as well, some useful information there on also how we can adapt. I just saw the one on burn rates, and yeah, we've seen a lot of NGOs challenged with that. They're not able to implement as they normally were. They've got money, they need to spend it. Or what can they do? So, you know, I think we've seen just the idea of looking at ways of maybe online methods of disseminating your information, just so that you can also continue to implement the projects. So that's just one suggestion that's come through the chat box as well. All right, thank you very much. We want to move on now. Tiwonge, are you here?
Good morning.
Mulibwanji.
Tiri bwino kaino.
Thank you. I'll just hand over straight to you so we can go ahead with your presentation, and Twonge will take us through opportunities and also the required response around this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. And please do let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes,
okay,
we can
great.
see.
Good morning and thanks for the opportunity, Kudzai and KFM team. And good morning to all the participants that are here. It's such a great opportunity for me to be here. And just to say, Kudzai, that this is my last final week with ActionAid. I'm moving on to WaterAid. So it's of course in the same portfolio of fundraising. It's always an opportunity for me to share my experience and of course some of the knowledge that I've gained over time. Just to explain a little bit about me, I'm Tuonge Kumwenda. As of today, I'm head of grants management and business development and communications with ActionAid. I've been on the role for 4 years. And before that, I was with Troca, and that's where I had the opportunity to meet Kudzai on governance programming and also supporting in terms of resource mobilization. So my presentation is quite brief, and I think the last presenter really preempted everything that I wanted to share, but I thought that also provided a good platform for me to pick up from. So we have COVID-19, and I think by the time we were hitting April or May, we kind of thought by October or somewhere thereabout, or by the time we're closing 2020, we'll have forgotten about it, or it would have, the scout would have died down a little bit. And what we are getting to realize is that that's not the case. It's something that has become a new normal, so to say. My presentation is going to focus on a number of areas, and these are the objectives of this presentation, is for everyone who is here to understand the overall fundraising environment in the new normal of COVID-19, and to appreciate what the donor interests are. And of course, also beyond COVID-19, we should not be oblivious to the fact that some things are still going on, some processes are still happening, and you have the overall international development landscape that is also influenced by a number of factors, not just COVID-19. So also being alert to the changing dynamics and context. And then for participants to understand and be able to do an internal review on their positioning in terms of assessing where they're at, and for the purposes of preparation of those opportunities that have come because of COVID, but also understanding the challenges and how to navigate or develop strategies to mitigate the impact on financial sustainability. So those are the objectives of my presentation. Is it coming as slideshow? Just to see, just to.
No, not yet. You might need to just click on slideshow.
I've done that. Okay.
Yes, it's showing now as a slideshow. Yeah.
All right, so I'll start because I'm a positivist. I'm quite positive. So what are the opportunities? And then I'm going to talk about some of the challenges and then the strategies and then how to mitigate. So one is that there is need to organizations to accept and appreciate that COVID will have medium term, short term, medium term, and long term. And when we talk about financial sustainability, it's a medium and the long term that we are concerned about, because it's not just what we have in the past now, but are we going to survive in the next 5-10 years, which is an issue that most or every other organization is looking at. Number two is that with COVID-19, it is an opportunity, I think, for most organizations to review resource mobilization strategies. So for those organizations, maybe like ours, that we developed our strategy in 2018, a 5-year strategy, and we did not anticipate any pandemic of this scale to hit. So you'd have a risk matrix within your resource mobilization strategy, or you'd have a risk matrix within your strategy or your strategic plan. So which maybe was silent or did not anticipate such scale of a pandemic and the impact there on resource mobilization. So there is need for organizations to have that in-depth discussion on the impact of COVID on this overall strategic plans, as well as resource mobilization plans or strategies. So I'm hoping that from participants, we have had this opportunity to look at this, because otherwise the challenge is without a strategy that really mentions or takes into consideration COVID-19, most of the attention or most of the approach has been very haphazard. So what is it that we can do? There's this opportunity, can we jump on it? There's this partner that wants to, there's this organization that wants to partner with us. So it's really haphazard, and there isn't a very good thought process. And we find that you are laboring yourself to applying, but because you haven't put a proper strategy and foundation to it, maybe the outcomes are not coming in as positive as we want. And that in itself creates a lot of stress and creates a lot of panic in organizations. So I would want resource mobilization in the area of COVID to be approached from a more of a strategic viewpoint than a more of the roof is burning, the house is burning, let's just do one or two things. Because in resource mobilization, you need, when every other opportunity has to be looked at, has to be assessed. So it is an opportunity to introspect, to look at our resource mobilization strategies. In addition, there's also an opportunity to review and revise donor scoping. So linked to the resource mobilization strategy is the donor scoping. So understanding what is the landscape, what is the interest for most donors. And obviously the interest has shifted. And as I said, if you don't have an approach that is from a viewpoint, from a strategic viewpoint, or if your donor matrix or donor scoping report has not been updated, you would not be able to understand what the interest or what the changing, the paradigm shifts have been made in terms of the donors. Obviously, most of the donors, I would say 95%, there is a shift that they have made. Others have upscaled on their partnerships. Others have opened up to new partnerships or new organizations to partner with, or others have drawn into alliances or have maybe contributed funding to a pool. So there is a need to actually, or there is an opportunity for organizations to look at that. The other point, the fourth point, is that COVID-19 has created an opportunity to communicate with donors. So everyone, and I would tell you this, no one has had it all figured. Even donors some have come to say, what are you like asking us? What are the areas that we want to look at? What are the challenges that communities are facing? And the challenges have changed as well. So we need to position ourselves and to communicate with donors. Who knows that our concept or our idea can influence a donor in terms of the funding pot that they earmarked for organizations. So we need to look at COVID-19 as an opportunity for us to influence the donors' position and where funds are going towards. The fifth point is that COVID-19 has presented an opportunity to scale up with existing donors. So as I alluded to the fact that some donors are just upscaling, some are looking up to new partnerships. So I'll give an experience for like Global Fund. Global Fund, in terms of the COVID-19 response or funding mechanism, they made a pot for existing partners to spend at least 5% of their funding, of their current funding to COVID response mechanism. And also they topped up with about $7 million US. I'm giving information for Malawi for nation response for COVID. And that was limited to their current portfolio of partners. So for those that already have partnerships with funders, it is an opportunity, and this is also linked to what I said on communicating, to say we have been implementing, for example, a program on early childhood development, but because schools have closed, learners cannot access classrooms, and as such, we need to look at other innovative ways of make sure that we are delivering content to learners. So that can, for some donors, they can say, look at what you already have and maybe just review budgets or revise your budgets. But others can say, look, we have been able to raise additional funding and this is available to you. The fifth, the sixth point is it is an opportunity to upscale on innovative or innovating in terms of information technology. So we usually, as organizations, plan our activities on face-to-face basis, where we'll have meetings, we'll have workshops, but because of COVID-19, as the past presenter said, we don't have the luxury to meet face-to-face. And maybe our investment on IT infrastructures organizations, and I would say this because now when you look at equipment and support, most organizations or most donors are not willing to provide those. So, the new normal, the COVID, has made it impossible for us to do certain things, and we have to look at the opportunities in terms of what infrastructure can we put in place for us to still communicate to someone, our impact area in Mutare, for example, where we cannot go there, we cannot travel, we cannot meet face to face. So most donors are giving that flexibility to include the IT equipment. And when we look at this, it's also good for organizations, because I think in this age and era where everything is you have to rely on technology, you have to make yourself visible through the digital space. There is need for an investment towards the same, for us maybe to procure laptops, to buy softwares. So we need to maximize such spaces to be able to push in some of those IT equipment. There's limitations on travel, maybe the number of people in vehicles, have a conversation with donors and say, maybe we have a partnership with WFP where we're distributing food stuff, but maybe we only have 3 vehicles, and because of this, we need more vehicles. So these are costs that, because of the changing context, most donors are willing to accept them. When in actual fact, if we didn't have COVID, they wouldn't be able to accept such cost. So those are some of the opportunities. As I said, before I go to some of the challenging factors, as I said, the development community is not just pushed or influenced by COVID-19. As I said, we don't need to be oblivious to the fact that there are other considerations that we need to make in terms of interest for development organizations. I'm mentioning, for example, the shifts in terms of FCO and DFID measure, and how the UK direct budget has been reduced by 25%. So those are some of other considerations that we also have to make, and this makes us to say, as an organization, maybe TUGI, for example, 100% of our funding was coming from DFID, and DFID has reduced their budget. How can we be able to cast the net wider to other funders that may be interested in our work, but also funders that have made a put specifically for COVID-19 and other sectors that are linked to COVID-19. Brexit, the impact of Brexit on UK-based organizations, and as you are talking about registering as a trust in the UK, obviously, as you know, with the Brexit, it has an impact in terms of organizations being able to get funding from other EU-based organizations and institutions. So we need to also look at that. And of course, I've also mentioned on emergencies, we have COVID-19, but COVID-19, yes, but we still have other emergencies. We have floods, we have hunger, famine, we have, some of the impact that COVID may have on other, for example, diseases. So being able to link all the emergencies, I know like Zimbabwe is really hard hit. We are having conversations with ActionAid Zimbabwe and other organizations for the ECHO call. So, there are other emergencies that are, there are emergencies that are still there that are having an impact. And for us, we should be able to link the impact of, the aggravating scale that COVID-19 will have on those emergencies and vis-a-vis. International geopolitics and global economic situation, countries that have been hard hit in the north, where we get most of our funding, they have also been hard hit, and they're having to look at their own problems and challenges and the economic downturn in the major countries where we get financial support for us who are in the global south. So those are other considerations and other changing, shifts that are coming in that will may aggravate the situation in terms of poverty levels in the communities where we target, also in terms of financial sustainability for us as organizations. What is the challenging impact of COVID-19? And obviously, I'm giving a snapshot in terms of decline based on the UK survey that was conducted in 2020 that shows a voluntary income decline of 48%. So most for organizations that get funding from maybe child sponsorship or or churches where people, individuals give money to charity on individual basis, you find that there is that huge decline. And obviously it's because families have been impacted, people have lost their loved ones. And you know, the income that we get from, you know, the for example, child sponsorship or from the religious bodies, for most organizations, we term it as flexible funding. And it usually is a backbone for financial sustainability for organizations, because most of the institutional grants, they are so much tied and there are so many restrictions and limitations in terms of how we use the funds. So this is definitely going to have a huge impact on most organizations in terms of reserves and funding. Also in terms of disruption of cash flow and loss of income and spending to the global south. So this only speaks to the challenges that most countries are facing, and the impact that their development agencies have in terms of then providing resources to us. What are the strategies that we can put in place for us to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, impact of the other prevailing circumstances that I also mentioned about? So there is need for organizations to move out of the business as usual, where you have, where you say, okay, we have these huge grants from EU, or we have foundations giving us money, and you know, we have signed a 5-year contract. We need to see things differently, because I have seen organizations that have signed 5-year contracts, but by the time we got to November, where October, where COVID hit so much, some of those contracts were terminated, or they were cause for organizations maybe to downscale. So there isn't, as we are in this situation, there isn't any long-term contract that should make us comfortable, and we need to look at it that way. We need to pivot on how we communicate. This is not the time to go dark. This is actually the time to be more visible, to use the digital platforms that are there, to you know, show how our work is impacting, or show how, maybe even show from the side of how COVID has made our work much more challenging, or how we have adapted, and then we show ourselves to the world or to organizations, and to communicate even to organizations. As I said, we can change the discourse in terms of opportunities that come. Fundraising for increases in operating costs due to precautionary or containment, or increase in demand for services. We need to look at our operating costs, and to see how we can minimize our cost, and also how we can make sure that if we are providing a service, maybe we are providing goods or services, how we can be out there, or how we can change our services to respond or to provide solutions and then be marketable. There is also the need to develop talking points where there are other meetings or workshops that are happening, and even like using spaces like this that KFM has provided to showcase our work, and even to showcase the challenges and reach out if you want to strike partnerships, if we want to get support, or if we have services or goods that we are offering or we are selling. There are multiple organizations that and foundations that have shown interest, and also I've mentioned on natural disasters or other emergencies. We also need to position ourselves so that we can respond to the emergencies linked to and the aggravating impact that has as a result of COVID-19. I'm sharing a few nuggets on the need for us to make our fundraising needs and our to make our organization visible, to design digital communications rooted in content strategies that help translate what the impact of coronavirus or COVID means to organizations, and how we have been able to reach to the communities that we're serving. And then we can include the communications on our website. We can run social campaigns. We can have digital campaigns. We can promote most engaging social media posts. We can also sign up and register as members on platforms where opportunities are shared. So long are the day, gone are the days where you would just wait for a new call to be out in the newspaper. You know, fundraising calls for us to also invest in it. So sign up in paid up platforms that then provides up-to-date opportunities from different donors. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. So I had a few questions just to get us introspecting or engaging that as organizations, we need to sit as a team and to see what are the opportunities that we are available, we have had as a result of COVID-19, what has been the negative impact, and what have we done so that we are able to position ourselves or be able to get into partnerships or be able, if we are offering services, to change adapt our services so that we are more responsive to the needs. That is all for me. Kudzai, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tuonge. Before we look at the questions, exciting to hear you're going to WaterAid. They are friends of ours there. Please say hi to Jesse in finance when you start your work there.
I will.
All right, there are a couple of questions. One, I know you had tackled it, but maybe you might just want to re-emphasize. It's from Moses. He says, how can we upscale our IT at organizational level in response to COVID-19?
Okay, thank you for that wonderful question. So there are so many ways of upscaling your IT, and this is not just saying, look, there's COVID, we had maybe EU, you gave us 2 laptops, but now we need 17 laptops. Or maybe we're offering a service, now we need to get into a digital space or do this. It's based on need. So you look at you assess what work you're doing in the communities, and then obviously there are challenges because of COVID-19, maybe challenges in terms of how you are delivering your programs. As I said, maybe you were doing the face-to-face trainings. Now, because you still have to do the trainings, but now you need to find other ways. So reaching the same target group, but then what do they need? For them to be able to access the meeting, they need a laptop, they need a gadget, they need internet. We have had situations where we have given funds to participants just for them to buy internet bundles, or we have given them a MiFi gadget for them to be able to still attend meetings virtually. So those are some of the things or IT upgrades that you can look at. But as I said, this is based on need. This is based on you having a thorough assessment or review on how you are delivering, the impact of COVID-19 on the delivery, and saying, because we still have to reach, because we still have to distribute, what can we do to make sure that we are preventing, we are following all the preventive measures. As I said, if you are distributing, for example, if your organization has a grant with WFP and you are giving out cash. Physically, you begin to explore what other mobile platforms. So you can get in partnership with MTN. I don't know if you have MTN there, or Airtel if you have Airtel there. So you can get into the partnerships where those third-party private sector can be able to distribute the money on your behalf. So that you minimize the direct interaction, the face-to-face interaction. So those are the things, but the bottom line is look at your organization, look at your deliverables, and look at the ways in which you can still deliver, but following the preventive measures. Make sure that your communities are still, accessing the services, but they are following preventive measures so that they are not exposed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So we found as well, we were doing some workshops with ministries here. So, the assumption sometimes is you work on getting your own IT set up ready, and you then don't realize your other stakeholders are going to face challenges. So we eventually had to scrap those workshops because out in the districts, they didn't have the IT requirements for the workshop. So it's important, I think, yes, you've touched on that as well, or even just getting the bundles for people might become important.
Yes, because we have had situations as well where we would send our IT person to sit down with a minister just to take them through, to get them to speak, because the minister was a keynote speaker to a study report that we're launching on COVID-19, and we needed the minister's voice. But then, 15 minutes before the meeting, the minister says, how do I navigate this? And we quickly sent our IT person to sit down and just to help them through. So those are some of the things that, as you're sharing, we need to look at.
Yeah, true. And then Rumbi has co-authored a paper on mental health care and provision of that service in Cameroon. So she was asking, in Southern Africa, what are some of the challenges and opportunities for mental health responses in this pandemic? I don't know, Tuong, if that's an area you're able to speak on.
Yeah, I can speak on it because we just had a session by a mental health expert a couple of days ago. I'll ask for the permission if they can allow me to share their presentation, but I thought it was very insightful because I think in our context, in our African context, mental health is more or less looked at as something that's not very, important. We really look considered at the very end when we have considered, funding, partners, everything else. But I think mental health is something that we need to consider because just like, when we're having the last meeting, I was in a situation where one of my team members, tested positive and had a family member who had tested positive, who had died. And, as a leader, and I needed, it impacted me. There was no way I could concentrate, even if I had a proposal to write that particular time. I don't think I'd have written a very good proposal. So I think as management, we need, in our respective organizations, we need to look at the impact that this has had on people, their capacity to cope. I think we usually, Africans, I'm not sure there, but here in Malawi, it's looked at as a sign of weakness for you to maybe say, look here, I'll not be able to attend this meeting because, I just had a breakdown, a mental breakdown. I don't think I can consider it. So most people tend to look at you as like, maybe she just doesn't want to work or this or that. But I think getting in a space where we can have conversation, to call on people, experts, because sometimes we need that expertise for people to come in and really challenge us and make us to think about it differently. And also I think just having conversation with your members, making flexible work times for people, And it's difficult in the fundraising environment where you have targets and you have timelines. But I think making flexible time and really having discussion and just gauging what people's temperature is at that particular moment and really being understanding, I think is one thing that we also have to do. Also, I think communicating with donors, because one thing that I realized was that because we're not working in the office, people have had to, attend to their loved ones who maybe were in quarantine. It impacted our maybe reports or our capacity to maybe submit budgets. So we have periodic updates that we send to donors, and we have just made it so deliberate to say on a weekly basis, we submit and say, our schedule, this is what we're going to do. We may have to delay sending this by this time because of ABCD, and everyone is able to understand. So I think communication is very key. Seeking help from experts is also important. Yeah.
All right, thank you. We've eaten into the next session, so I'll just ask Tuonge if you can just go into the chat box, because there's, I think, a question from Yedzo there that would be great to have you answer as well, if you can.
Maybe can you just read it out for me?
What I wanted you was to respond. Okay, she's asking that, we're talking, let me, I lost it, let's go. Okay, there's one from My Day here who says, yeah, a lot of the issues, we're talking of those organizations meeting practical needs of communities. What about for those that are focusing on policy support to national and regional processes through government and international development partners? And then there's another one, taking note of the fact that our existing and potential funding partners also approve applications based on recommendations or good word from within the donor circles. For a startup or even existing organization looking to approach a new donor, what have you to add as advice to get through to them? Also noting that a face-to-face engagement is limited or impossible. How can one start building trust and make the new partner consider with the benefits of doubt? So I don't know if you're able to respond to that in the chat box while Tariro takes on the next stage.
Okay, I'll do that, yeah.
There was just a request as well. People wanted to see you. We don't know if you're prepared to share a video of yourself or.
Oh, word, am I ready? This is one of the mental health issues.
Rumbi couldn't share because
you don't have your makeup on half of the time. Let me do. I think I still feel confident.
Okay. All right.
There. Yes.
There's Tuonge. Yeah.
Hi everyone.
Zikomo Kwambili Tuonge. Tuonge will be with us in February for the longer fund resource mobilization workshop. So we'll share details for that as well, and we'll be able to share more with her. So thank you very much, Tuonge. Tariro, apologies, we've eaten into your time. I hope you're not rushing to go off, but would like to hand over to you to just share some tips and advice on successful resource mobilization. And Tariro is in where are you? In Kenya, isn't it? So it's great to see the networks that are there for people to be able to link up with. So over to you, Tariro.
Thank you so much, Kudzi. So as Kudzi has introduced me, my name is Tariro Tandi, and I currently work for Agent Action Fund Africa, which is a Pan-African feminist fund that resources the work of women's rights movements across Africa. So we work across all the 55 countries in Africa, supporting the different initiatives that activists, women human rights defenders come up with, whether they are registered or not registered. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I do have my notes, which I'm going to be using as I'm going to be making the presentation. And just to make sure that my Wi-Fi is also good, I'm going to, and I forgot, just in case we have my colleagues who are visually impaired, I'm dressed in a black dress. I have a bowed head. I'm wearing a pair of green spectacles, and I have what's the color? Oh my God! I went to Kumusha school. I have lipstick on. I was trying to name the color of the lipstick, but I couldn't. I have lipstick on, and I'm wearing Africa. Representative earrings. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I am so glad to be here to talk about an area that is really fundamental in terms of our organizing and in terms of resource mobilizations. I think at the beginning of the year, I was really a bit skeptical because my role is head of partnerships and development, and most of my roles entail fundraising for the institution, so that we are then able to provide resources for the different organizations across Africa. And so at the beginning of the year, I remember writing on LinkedIn that I was so nervous. I was really anxious, but I ended up saying, you know what, I'm reminded of Julius Caesar's words that say, the courageous ones only see death but once. And so I am believing that there's a lot more that we can do. And so I'm going to be sharing the tips that can help us in improving our fundraising, in improving our resource mobilization as we go forward. And just to say, for me, 2020 in terms of resource mobilization was one of my very successful years. And I'm looking forward to 2021 and making it another successful year. So I'm going to start by just encouraging us and saying we all need to keep calm and we need to keep fundraising. We should never give up. So I'm going to remove my video and then I'm going to make my presentation. I'm sorry you're going to be hearing the flipping of my notebook because I did write notes. I'm a lawyer by background, and so you know lawyers and writing things down. So no doubt that COVID-19 is really presenting us with a tumultuous moment for many institutions, especially with regards fundraising. But suffice to also say that conversely, this moment is presenting new virtual engagement opportunities with new actors and partners who are enriching the partnership landscape, which is heightening different opportunities, multiple opportunities for resource mobilization. So this is really a critical moment, like my colleagues have been saying, that calls on all of us as resource mobilizers to be very intentional in our fundraising in ways that ensures we step up to the moment, to the current moment. So I would want to look at the undeniable impacts of COVID-19, both as a crisis of health and as a crisis of wealth. So we've heard from previous colleagues in terms of how COVID-19, and we know in our own experiences, like I've been losing people left, right, and center this year. It's been a terrible year for me. But it's a crisis of health, but at the same time, it's a crisis of wealth. And I'm going to look at the impact of COVID. I think Tiwonge made us look at the positives, and I'm going to not necessarily want to sadden us, but to just look up to the realities of what COVID-19, what the impact of COVID-19 have been. So no doubt we're going to be experiencing global economic recession, which all of us need to prepare for in one way or the other in our institutions. There's also declining tax revenues because at the present moment, we know where we get most of our resources, people are losing jobs. So in terms of tax returns and all, these are actually going to reduce. We're also going to have less resources from individuals who will be able to donate to charity because of what is currently happening across the globe. We're also going to be experiencing, or we are already experiencing, smaller endowments, as these are hit by stock market losses. I think we've been seeing, yes, the stock market seems to be, rising up a bit slowly, but we know what happened from last year and what is continuing to happen in terms of stock market. There's also going to be less revenue for government to spend on aid, as their own people need aid. I think a former colleague of mine spoke about how governments are currently looking out for their own people. So whereas UK aid could be able to resource the global south, at the present moment, they themselves are currently being impacted by COVID-19. So it means there's reduction in terms of the resources that are going to be going out to different institutions. And lastly, there is less wealth for companies to be able to give out for social investment, as most companies are actually looking out to see how it is that they can hold on to the little bit of resources that they have. So in terms of the tips that I'm going to be giving, these are tips that I have used in my own work, tips that other people, other colleagues have used in the different networks that I find myself in for resource mobilizers. So I would want to talk about the need for us, like right now, is the need for us to demonstrate a pivotal role that we are playing in supporting COVID-19. I've been seeing questions around, does it mean that you then run away from your mandate and you start doing COVID-19 work because that's where the money is? But that's not what we mean by showing that you're responding to COVID-19. What we need at this point in time is institutions that are able to demonstrate what makes you stand out. What are you doing? You need to put it out there so that the necessary partners can see the impact of your work. And we also now need to be using online spaces more than we were using them before. And this makes it easier to build confidence in funders. And one thing that my experience has been that the more you put out your work using various social media platforms, the more you actually have a lot of funders who have the resources interested in knowing the work that you're doing. So we need not tire in terms of us engaging in online spaces. We need to continue mobilizing resources from multiple stakeholders. So if you've been getting your resources from private foundations, why won't you try getting resources from private companies, individuals, governments, so that you diversify your sources of funds? The danger in having one source of funding is that when that source of funding is hit by whatever tragedy, it also means that you are left with no resources or very little resources. So we need as much as we can to diversify our resources. We also need to constantly update our funders. They can, and by constantly updating our funders, I mean not waiting for the 6-month report that we need to send or the annual report that we need to send. If you have anything interesting that you have dealt with, share with them, in a way, make it interesting, not sending like 3 long pages, but just maybe, a nugget of 2 paragraphs of something that's exciting that you think is worthy of sharing. And you don't have to wait for your reporting times to be able to do that. What that does is that your funder always has you in their mind. And when they have their colleagues, their friends who have extra resources, they will think of you because already you're you're setting yourself apart from the rest who only communicate with funders at the staggered times in terms of annual reporting, quarterly reporting, but you're going the extra mile to show the impact of the resources that they are giving to you. So you don't have to go owl and just wait for when it is that you're supposed to submit your reports. I've seen that working a lot, and through that, as an institution, we've been able to get a lot of referrals to a number of funders who then actually support our work. So again, keep your funders informed in terms of what it is that you're doing and what it, if you have interesting stories of change, then share with them also so that they are able to actually see that you're an institution worthy of support, and when they have any referrals, they can refer you to them. And one thing that I've also noticed is that towards the end of the year, some funders usually have extra resources within their pockets. And so this is the time for you to actually shine in terms of the work that you're doing. And in that way, they'll be able to then say, oh, we actually have this 30,000 or this 300,000 that we had in our bank, in our accounts. Do you want to do something with it? So get to that point where funders are comfortable to actually give you resources, even when you have not necessarily asked, but your work has kind of resource mobilized for and on your behalf. We also need to review our revenue streams, and most funders have been affected by the crisis as well, and we need to be able to know that it takes a while, so we need to be patient. It takes a while to get resources from funders. I remember for us to get resources from CEDAS, which is a big grant that we have from them, by the way, but it took us 5 years of flying there and having face-to-face meetings with them. So you need to invest in actually engaging in resource mobilization. But our bet this time around is different because we can't have the face-to-face interactions. We need to maximize on our digital platforms and ensure that in maximizing our digital platforms, we are also speaking to the work, to our successes, to our impacts, so that people already get driven or drawn to your work without you even saying much. So again, the previous speakers have been talking about engage with online spaces, and I will need to just continue emphasizing the acceleration of digitalization and online giving. So there is online giving that is currently going on. People put out pages and they are requesting for resources. Let's say you are into you want to be able, like Rumbi was saying, to be able to give meals. You can formulate a page, and that page, GoFundMe page, that will be able to get you resources, and then you are able to do the little bit of work that you're supposed to be doing. So again, it's about going out there and looking at what is available and what is possible. I would want to talk about communicate. You need your communication to be on point. You need to communicate well. You need to communicate the right things. You need to ensure that you demonstrate the agility of your organization. You don't have to wait and say, oh no, but the kind of work that we've been doing does not necessarily speak to COVID-19. But I would want to challenge all of us here and say there isn't any work that has not been impacted by COVID-19 that will not speak to COVID-19 work. And so, for instance, if you're a human rights organization, show how it is that you're engaging with governments in instances where maybe there's been the violation of human rights due to lockdowns, for instance. What are you doing? Don't just wait and sit down and say, oh no, but we've become redundant because of COVID-19. But be innovative and communicate the work that you're doing, showing your agilities in terms of crisis, because that's what they want to see. They want to see organizations, institutions that are agile, that are responsive, that demonstrate their relevance during times of crisis. And I'm almost about to finish. You need to, right now, there are a lot of organizations that are not able to go onto the ground. So for those community organizations, those smaller organizations, you need to be able to take advantage of this localization agenda where, because you're closer to the people, you are ideally placed to respond. So an organization, for instance, NGOs might find it difficult to respond in certain communities, but because you're a CBO that is based within the community, you will actually be better placed to respond. So you need to take advantage of that and, you know, narrate or create your narration on your strength at the present moment, which is that you're clearly placed to respond. You are the first line response that's available to the communities. I also want to talk about intensifying collaboration. You need to collaborate. I know there are challenges around collaboration because people mostly compete. And so with competition, collaborations become a little bit difficult, but you need to be able to intensify collaboration and partnerships as a fundraising strategy, because you then become more effective, you reach larger audiences, you are able to attract more funds. So as a smaller institution, you might attract 10,000 US dollars, but imagine if 6 of you come together, and these are 6 organizations that are focusing on different areas that have different strengths. You will be able to actually garner a lot of support, one, and two, you will be able to fundraise for larger grants that will make your life much more easier, and you'll be able to access larger grants. We are a sister fund. We have sister funds across the globe. And when we fundraise together, we are able to raise $20 million because we are doing this as sister funds, which might not be possible for us as UAF that's based in Africa to be able to do the same. So collaborations are critical at this point in time. There's also the aspect of reserve funds. You need, so firstly, I'll talk about the need to ensure that you have reserve funds, and reserve funds usually have allow institutions to run for 6 months when you have not received any funds at all. So at this point, you need to hold off from tapping into those reserve funds so that you then actually tap into them when it is absolutely necessary. So at the same time, raise your reserve funds. Every institution, I believe, should be able to raise resources that go towards reserve funds. And funders are slowly getting it, that it is imperative for them to support funding or resourcing reserve funds. Now is the time to invest in fundraising. I think I spoke about that earlier. Invest money to make money. That's the science. You can't want to fundraise without any money. Invest, look for a professional who can write. Writing proposal is a skill. So if you don't have that skill, make sure that you invest in having someone who does the writing of proposals, or you invest in your staff members getting the necessary training for them to develop that skill so that they are able to write sellable and successful proposals, and also ask for unrestricted funding. That's another important thing. At this point in time, because of how things are shifting, the ground is shifting, it's important to ask for unrestricted funding that allows you to be able to be agile in your response, to be able to respond as and when you see fit. And just to conclude, I hope my presentation continues to give you courage and the resilience necessary to be successful in your fundraising efforts. And I'm always available to share more tips as and when people actually need practical tips to fundraise. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tariro. I don't know if there are any questions that we have for her. Tariro, there's this one question maybe you could help with. The question was, funders are very interested in things like governance systems. How, as a new NGO, do you address this? Because I suppose in most cases, the new NGOs would not have set up those systems.
So what I want to tell people is that, for instance, I'll look at us, right? We support organizations that are not even registered. But for as long as you're doing the work and there is a trail to show that this is the work that you're doing. So I would want that to offer that as the first thing, that people shouldn't stay off fundraising or doing their work because they do not necessarily have the necessary governance structures and systems in place. You will find that there are smaller funders who are actually willing to support you for as long as your work is credible and that there are people who can support that indeed this is the work that you're doing. And then secondly, it is really not hard. I think just find someone who can support you with ensuring that you do have your governance structures and systems in place. But I always say, don't feel intimidated into not raising funds because you are not yet a properly constituted institution. There are funders who understand that this takes time, but your zeal, your passion can actually be the thing that moves you into doing the work that you're doing. And as you're putting those structures in place, you can actually access resources.
Okay, thank you. Then another question. Thank you, Tariro, for the presentation. Much appreciated. How do we access unrestricted funding?
So in most instances, when you're writing a proposal or your concept note, right, when you put out your budget, you actually have those kind of discussions with your funders. And private foundations are usually very open to actually having unrestricted funding. It's much more difficult when it then comes to governments and multilateral donors. But with private foundations, they are usually very, very flexible. And like for us, I think all our private foundation funders have given us unrestricted funding. And that allows you to move resources as and how you see fit, depending on what's currently pertaining on the ground.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions for Tariro? Thank you.
I see someone is asking for strategies of building reserve funds. Can I just come in?
Yes, please.
So I think this is one thing that most organizations have not necessarily been intentional about, but slowly most funders are able to allow you to put aside a certain percentage towards your reserve fund. And so this can be 5%, this can be 3%, you start every time when you try and do something, it might be rejected, but it might sell through. So the thing is that most people are so find funders to be straitjacketed, but that's not necessarily true. There are funders that actually know the importance of setting aside a little bit of resources for when you are under the rain. And so you start off by, when you're doing your budget, with your budget outline, you start off by putting 1% to one funder, and they allow you, and you already put that aside. You go on to another funder, you put 3%, you are just trying, and if they say, oh no, but 10% is so much, then you ask, can we put it at 5%? I think there's an assumption that there's rigidity in terms of how it is that you break down your budget, but there really isn't. Because if you look at the global north, most of the funders, that's one thing that I have noticed. Most of the global north institutions do have reserve funds that will take them a year plus. They have investments, they have buildings. But look at the global south. We don't have, because we are afraid to take that leap of faith and say, let us put aside so much for our reserve fund. So, try 1% here, 2% there, 3% there. It will add up in one way or the other.
Definitely. So I think a lot of times people don't do it because they think it's not going to happen. They don't even bother to try and raise that sort of income. So you have nothing to lose from attempting. And I think, as Maxwell also said in a post that he put there as well, as smaller NGOs, develop your costing model, so you're also able to explain your figures and show how you've come up with those, and also make sure your overheads are being covered, and doing research and finding out which bigger NGOs or funders can fund your overhead. So you also approach those. It's very important. There's a question there. Kindly requesting what organizations are out there that have set up COVID funds targeting Africa and Southern Africa specifically.
Okay, so I had put down a list, but I just thought, because of our timing, I couldn't share. But so I'll speak about African Development Bank. I'll speak about UNHCR. I'll speak about CIDA-S, that's the Swedish one. I'll speak about UK Aid DFID. I'll speak about WFP. I'll speak about USAID, UNICEF, UNDP, World Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, Global Affairs Canada has actually put out, I think, 500 million for COVID-19. Then Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, then MasterCard Foundation. Those are the ones that I currently know that openly have funds and resources for people to respond to COVID-19 crisis.
Oh, thank you for that list. How do you get to know, Tariro? How do people get to know who is out there and offering these funds?
So some of it is research and networking, Kudzi. If you're a resource mobilizer and you don't have maybe 5, let's say at least 5 people who are also resource mobilizers, then it becomes problematic for you to access the information that can improve your own work, your own resourcing work, because we literally feed off each other as resource mobilizers. And I have a group of resource mobilizers across the globe, and we share this kind of information. Oh, do you know that Rockefeller Foundation is having resources for this? They actually want to cover the global south, so we're not eligible to apply. Can you try and apply? Can you try and see what's happening? But another critical thing, Kudzi, is that when you're using the social media platform pages, right, and you are targeting certain funders, because some of them don't want solicitation, what you can do is that when you're putting out your interesting work, tag them so that they see your work and then they'll come to you. That's how fundraising doesn't have to be difficult. You just have to be creative and ensure that your work speaks for itself, which makes it so much easier when people now reach out to you and say, oh no, we have this 50,000 that we're thinking of giving you. We have this 500,000 that we're thinking of giving to you. So It's playing around with different strategies to ensure that practically you're able to access the resources that are available. But I'll also share the list that I have, Kudzi, with you, so you can share with the people that have attended.
Okay, we'll share the list with everyone. So thank you very much, Tariro. I think we can wrap your session up now as well. And yeah, we've gone past our intended 11 o'clock, but I'm sure it's been worth it for everyone. Really insightful presentations, but so much to take away. I think for me, just to hear Tariro and Ruby talking about, maybe this is like their best year in terms of resource mobilization, when we're expecting, money to be so scarce, but it's really how you approach it. And as Tariro said, fundraising doesn't have to be so scary. Some of the things she's talking about, just tagging people, just seem so basic, but we need to know that stuff. I liked what Claudette put in one of the boxes. You need to adapt or die, so we're also having to adapt to the new norm, to be agile and to stand out and shine. I think our presentations, it's so much knowledge for us to take as well. And just the fact of the use of the digital platform, the communication. So thank you to our presenters for all this. You can reach out to them. We'll share their details with their permission on email to everyone who's come out, but also they're all on LinkedIn, so you can also link up with them on those social platforms as well. And thank you to everyone who's attended. From the 9th to the 12th of February, we then have a longer resource mobilization and financial sustainability workshop. So I think this was just a teaser in terms of what's possible with resource mobilization. So we're hoping to see some of you there. Michelle will be in touch about registration. So we're hoping to get lots more of you to join us on this session. It'll be longer, it'll be more practical. We really want to immerse ourselves in resource mobilization and sustainability. So please make sure you join us for this. We'll also be joined by Right Cure from South Africa. So they'll be sharing particularly around writing proposals, around communication as well. For starter NGOs, we have this incubation hub that we have. So we're just helping smaller NGOs just start up well. So all these issues, like for example, the governance that we're talking about, we can just help you to know how to set up your governance structures, your financial systems, issues around your contracts with staff, even registration. How do we register as a PVO, as a trust? We're able to help you with that as well. And also around resource mobilization, your donor scoping, and we'll have experts work with you to be able to help you set up. So there's also that work. For the more established NGOs, please reach out to us. We can also just talk and see what it is that we can help you with. Because for us, I think the success of our NGO clients means success for us and success for the communities that we all work in. So thank you everyone for joining us in this session today. We will share the recording with everyone who's attended. I think we have your email addresses. And we look forward to meeting you in other platforms. If there are any areas that you feel we can help facilitate to share with the sector, please just let us know as well, and we'll be able to see what we can do to provide similar platforms. So thank you everyone, and have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye. This was helpful.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was an interesting session. We learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rosita.
Thank you so much for the session.
Thank you, everyone.